primarily because she is a member of GREVIO, the monitoring body of the Istanbul Convention. So we will start with her quickly outlining what is actually happening right now in the monitoring process. But Dr. Ratkovic is also, a well-established professional, over 30 years of experience in this area. So we are very privileged to have her here. Then right next to, oh, sorry, I'm just making sure I'm not confusing these. So I'm going to go next to Branislava. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. So it's Marvanova-Vargova. Very good. Now, I've already got to know a little bit about Brani's work yesterday, but essentially she is running an incredible NGO shelter, as well as a broader NGO that works with domestic violence survivors. They also run a helpline here in the Czech Republic. Now we're going to hear from her about how this is being implemented now in the Czech Republic, how it stands with the ratification or lack of in the Czech Republic, and we look forward to hearing from her. Then next to Brani is Barbora Boražová. Okay, I'll practice. I'll get better. Feel free to slaughter my name. I have a complicated one, so you could do that as well. Barbora is the head of the coordinating Center for Gender-Based Violence and Domestic Violence in Slovakia. She's also a lawyer and has worked on these issues for a very long time. I think many of you are also aware of her work. She will talk to us about Slovakia, the national context, and also talk to us a bit in the discussion about what is so important to emphasize from the Istanbul Convention. So I look forward to hearing from her about that. And finally, we are very lucky to have Line Nersas. Is that right? See, this is a multicultural, multinational panel. She's a sociologist from the University of Oslo. But at the moment, we are thrilled to have her as the policy director in the Norwegian Ministry of Justice in Norway. She will give us a sense of the Norwegian context in this discussion as well. So, before we kick off with the monitoring overview, I just wanted to mention very briefly, because I was asked to state a little bit from our perspective as practitioners, but also as people who've worked on this convention from the beginning, and have an overview of this issue of domestic violence and violence against women throughout Europe. How has this convention impacted how we work, how we see this issue around Europe developing? And I just wanted to highlight a few small things. I personally believe that this Istanbul Convention has given civil society broadly, women's rights groups, but many others, a real impetus to take stock of where their country is. It's an incredible checklist, essentially, of where is our country lacking. Now, while there's progress in every single country in some ways, every country has issues. It is my esteemed honor as someone in Amnesty International to always be the skunk at the party. I will always have to highlight what the human rights problems are. But what's so interesting is that this has really given us, and as so many others, and so many lawyers, and so many advocates, a tool to check where we are in each country on this topic and how we are doing as a society in battling domestic violence and violence against women. It's pushed us forward, and I believe it is an energy that we need to harness. It's an energy that we still need to jump on. It's something that is going to fade a little bit. You know, the feeling of energy around a new negotiated convention is there's going to be a risk that it fades, right? And I think we all have to together hold up this piece, not as a convention, but as an agreement together that we are going to tackle every single element of this. Now, just to give you some examples, we've worked in Turkey, for example, very intensively with this convention. I truly believe that there wouldn't be some of the new shelters, multifunctional shelters that we're seeing in Turkey now if it wasn't for the Istanbul Convention. Don't get me started on Turkey, I have some other issues with Turkey, but it's an incredible achievement of the Istanbul Convention that there has been some progress in these very tough times on domestic violence in some pockets, right? And that's thanks to the incredible women's rights movement in Turkey. But the Istanbul Convention played a big role there. We're also seeing things shifting somewhat, even in the discussions around ratification. To highlight a few differences very briefly, because it's so broad, the convention, because it covers so many areas, different elements are emphasized in different contexts, and you'll hear some of that now. But I wanted just to highlight a few. I think, for example, in Hungary, we've done a lot of research on domestic violence, and particularly the response of the police. And there's a very common saying, sadly still, amongst police officers, which is, unless blood flows, we don't intervene. It came up in almost every interview we did with police officers. Now, elements of the Istanbul Convention really deal with some of those attitudes, some of those issues, and I believe it will make a difference if this does get ratified in the end. In the UK, we're looking at domestic violence against asylum seekers, but also as a ground for seeking asylum. You know, this was a tough part for those of you who were part of the negotiations. This was difficult to get into the convention, but so crucial to make sure that countries recognize domestic violence can be a form, in some ways, of persecution. And protection, a lack thereof, of women is a part of the asylum process. So that's a major priority in the UK. And again, can be dealt with if we get ratification of the convention there. And finally, even in the Nordic countries and other Western European countries, the issue of consent-based definitions. You know, what kind of definition do we need to finally tackle the issue of lack of persecutions? That's something that the Istanbul Convention can help change, and we will use it to change it. So it shows you the breadth of the issues that we're dealing with. It shows you the different kind of issues that we can use this convention for. And one of the most important establishments in the convention, we believe, is the monitoring of this convention. It's a strong mechanism, but we need to see, of course, how this is working and how it's developing. And so the very first question I wanted to ask is actually just to Dr. Ratkovic. Would you be able to give us a very brief overview of what's happening right now in the monitoring process, what it means, and what you're looking at the moment? Yeah? Please go ahead. You take it.
Thank you so much. I would like to be really brief and informative. And maybe your introduction inspired me to start with one of the primary goals of the Council of Europe is actually safeguard, protection and promotion of human rights. And violence against women and domestic violence actually undermines the core values on which the Council of Europe is based. So, you know, there are a lot of recommendations by Council of Europe on the same issues, and the Istanbul Convention is one of the conventions relating to the violence against women and domestic violence, but its predominantly main goal of the convention is violence against women and domestic violence. So Istanbul Convention became the living instrument because two first reports of implementations already done. It was in September this year for Austria and Monaco. Another two reports for Denmark and Albania are almost completed, but following the rules of Grevio, they are not published, and I will just explain our, let's say, experience and issues according to two reports already published. Before that, I would like to remind you very briefly, sorry. Okay, please. You can see on the slide just a reminder of the main values of the convention. And convention asks for gender perspective to be taken when implementing the Istanbul Convention and evaluating measures. So far, all Council of Europe countries sign the Istanbul Convention with exception of Russia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. So far, we have 26 ratification. The last one was from Estonia, maybe 10 days ago. As you know, European Union also signed the convention and on that way support and would like to implement core values from the conventions as well. Implementation of the Istanbul Convention covers women and girls, that's on the first place, without discrimination of age, race, sexual orientation, religion, social origin, migrant status, etc. The convention is also dedicated for other victims of domestic violence, such as men's, children's, elderly, etc. I don't have opportunity to go deeply in the explanation, but just a reminder because I do believe that you are very well know about the main course of the convention. Also, convention is based on the 4 P's, which means prevention, protection, and support services, very important. Notice prosecution and integrated policies. How is going evaluation and monitoring of the process of the implementation of Istanbul Convention? There are actually 2 pillars for monitoring system. The first one is monitoring group of 10. Now Grevio consists of 10 independent experts. After the 25th ratification, the process for next 5 members of Grevio actually is ongoing. And very soon we will have 15 members. They are independent experts and they are monitoring, Grevio monitoring the implementation of Istanbul Convention. That's the experts level. Another level is political one, political follow-up body representing by state parties, the committees of the parties. They have political role. We as a Grevio members have experts level of the implementation. Next slide, I don't know if you see in detail, that's the scheme for the evaluation process. It's starting with questionnaire. Questionnaire is on the site of website of the Grevio, and we made it in the very beginning of establishment of Grevio. It was September 2015. In order to announce all questions for reporting, doesn't matter that the country is invited for evaluation or not. When the Grevio decided to invite country by country for evaluation, within 6 months the state party has the opportunity to provide state report according to the questionnaire. The next step is, and during that 6 months, it's very, very important that NGO representatives has the opportunity to send to Grevio their shadow report. And I would like to ensure you that Grevio pay equal attention for the state report as well as for the shadow report or just information sent by the NGOs on their view of implementation of Istanbul Convention. That's for us very value source of information, not just for comparison. Sometimes we have opportunity to make a better picture about the whole situation in the state, looking together all information from state representatives as well as for the civil sector institutions, etc. Another step is state dialogue. State dialogue is always organized in Strasbourg, in Council of in Grevio premises, with representatives of the state. It's a good opportunity to make a dialogue. It's really dialogue, and we try to reach more information after the state report is presented to Grevio. Next is state visit. Actually, that's another chance to meet state representatives, but also representatives of civil sector, institutions, etc., ombudspersons and others. For example, last week was study visit was organized for Turkey and Montenegro because they are under evaluation now. After the evaluation visit, Grevio prepared the draft Grevio report, and that report is always sent to the state for their comments and maybe some additional information, etc. After that, Grevio made activities for adoption of the report and publication of the report. We have situation with Austria and Monaco so far, and I already mentioned that Denmark and Albania will be very soon, it's already adopted, will be published. And after the publishing of the report, they will be sent to committee of the parties, to the authorities, as well as the party and to the parliament of the state. It's very important. This convention is has some specificities because of involvement of NGO sector is really crucial and important, and activities done by state authorities together, and involvement with the NGO sector is crucial for success of harmonization with the Istanbul Convention, and a special role has Parliament as well, not just for the process of signing and ratification of the Istanbul Convention. As you see, finally when the report is adopted and published, Parliament also has opportunity to discuss and make some actions towards better implementation. Another slide actually is explaining same procedure on the another way. I already mentioned that Austria and Monaco already have reports, and Albania and Denmark will be next. Of course, you can find the reports of Austria and Monaco on the Grevio website, who has interest on it. Monaco is just on French language up to now, but will be provided English soon, and Austrian on both languages. Findings. That's not so much experience, but I can assure you that our experience or findings regarding the so far evaluation, we can recognize that focus is always focus is always on domestic violence, less attention towards all forms of violence against women. Maybe I'm so fast. Which means physical, sexual, psychology, and economical violence. So the focus is to domestic violence, and not just on legislation, also in the integrated policies, services, etc. Another findings as relating to the due diligence, or Article 5 of the connection, Article 5 of Convention, which means that state authorities, officials, agents, institutions have to acting on behalf of the state in conformity with their obligations to prevent, investigate, punish, and provide reparation for acts of violence covered by Convention. It's already mentioned that some of that duties are not performed or not performed well. Not have time for explain more. Difficulties in accession to services for women with disabilities, asylum seekers, etc., also recognized as a problem in the implementation of this convention. The role of coordinatory body. Coordinatory body is obligation of the every state authorities to make some coordinatory body between Grevio and other institutions, authorities within the country. That's coordinatory body, it's so far weak and don't have opportunity to provide all obligations and services what Istanbul Convention asks. Very briefly. Okay, and financial and human resources are crucial for implementation. Without financial and human resources, it's impossible to implement Istanbul Convention as a very complex and very broad area which the Istanbul Convention covers. So for the shortness, but I try and do my best. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Please. Now, I'm going to go a little bit off program, I apologize, but I want to at least make sure that we already now ask for a couple of questions. I have time for 2 questions for this specific presentation, and then we're going to go into the national situations. I hope that's okay with my fellow panelists. Okay, fantastic. So if you have any specific questions right now about this process, about what's happening in the monitoring phase, please feel free. If not, we continue. Okay, going once. All right, great. I have one question. Maybe I can abuse my situation here as a chair and just ask you very briefly, what is the requirement of these reports being published? You mentioned there's sometimes a delay, or there's how do they get published? What is who needs to consent to what to make it? So you mentioned that there are sometimes delays between a report being finished and then the publication of it, because we just want to understand a little bit better what needs to happen before a report is published.
Okay.
Who needs to consent to it?
Okay. Once when Grevio publish report, it's published on the website of the Grevio, and because we have just experience with 2 of them, Austria and Monaco, it was let's say more attention of media and press Grevio gave to just promote our activities, and after that the state authority also has opportunity or obligation to publish on their national language the report. There are not strict time for it. Expectation is within 6 months. But if country doesn't do it, Grevio will make some notice and push them for it.
Thank you very much. Okay, in that case, since we are hosted so kindly by the Czech Republic, I think we should start in the Czech Republic. Why don't we ask, Brani, can you give us a sense of how things stand here in terms of the ratification and what your perspective as a professional is?
Dobrý den, já využiju této příjemné možnosti na mezinárodní konferenci hovořit česky a budu tedy mluvit česky, přestože to není můj mateřský jazyk. Ale já bych chtěla jednak moc poděkovat za pozvání na tento panel a poděkovat organizátorům za to, že zde vlastně mohou sedět expertky, odbornice z různých zemí. Myslím si, že je to docela unikátní příležitost pro Českou republiku se toho dozvědět víc, ať už o Istanbulské úmluvě nebo o zkušenostech z jiných zemí. Já budu stručná, protože si myslím, že důležité je mít prostor pro diskuzi a proto bych jenom velmi stručně nějak jako updateovala situaci ohledně Istanbulské úmluvy v České republice. Ten stav mi umožní být stručná. A dál bych asi jenom zmínila pár bodů, o kterých se domnívám z pohledu organizace, která poskytuje přímo služby ženám, které mají zkušenost s násilím ve vztazích, v čem vnímáme nějakým způsobem ten význam nebo tu důležitost celého komplexního přístupu Istanbulské úmluvy. Takže pro zahraniční hosty informace o stavu v České republice je ta, že v květnu 2016 Česká republika podepsala Istanbulskou úmluvu, nicméně zatím jsme neratifikovali. V podstatě v roce 2016 bylo usnesením vlády ministru spravedlnosti uloženo předložit vládě návrh legislativních opatření k zajištění právě provádění úmluvy, to znamená nějakým způsobem sladit legislativu tak, aby byla kompatibilní s požadavky úmluvy, protože Česká republika vlastně se rozhodla pro ten přístup, že nejdříve vnitřně sladíme legislativu a až poté budeme ratifikovat, přestože to úmluva jako taková nevyžaduje. Jsou země, které zvolili jiný přístup, nejdříve ratifikovali a poté slaďují legislativu. Nicméně v současné době je stav takový, že Ministerstvo spravedlnosti přijalo připomínku Nejvyššího soudu k návrhu legislativních prací vlády na rok 2017 a tím došlo k posunutí termínu pro předložení novely trestního zákoníku z června 2017 na listopad 2017. Nicméně vzhledem k tomu, že jsme teď čerstvě po volbách a nemáme ještě ani sněmovnu, ani vládu, tak v současné chvíli lze těžko předvídat, kdy a zda bude ta novela trestního zákoníku schválena tak, abychom mohli postoupit dál v procesu ratifikace. Takže zřejmě ten výhled, když budu realisticko-optimistická, bych viděla tak na rok 2019 za Českou republiku. Tak tolik asi k informacím, které mám v současné době k procesu ratifikace v České republice. A tak, jak jsme slyšeli už od předřečnice, že Istanbulská úmluva stojí na několika pilířích a kromě teda prevence a také těch legislativních opatření se zaměřuje na ochranu žen a obětí domácího násilí a násilí na ženách, tak já bych zde využila té příležitosti a právě zdůraznila velkou potřebu nebo význam Istanbulské úmluvy právě v tomto směru, zejména, nebo asi ne zejména, myslím, že je to potřeba ve všech zemích, protože asi žádná země nesplňuje ty požadavky na dostupnost a kvalitu specializovaných služeb pro ženy oběti násilí a pro oběti domácího násilí. Mezinárodní organizace WAVE publikuje vlastně takový přehled o dostupnosti služeb a bohužel žádná ze zemí nesplňuje ty požadavky, ale jenom jako příklad za Českou republiku v roce 2016 byl proveden výzkum, analýza kvality a dostupnosti specializovaných pobytových služeb pro oběti domácího násilí. Přičemž tedy bylo zjištěno, že v roce 2016 evidoval registr poskytovatelů sociálních služeb celkem 93 pobytových sociálních služeb s registrovanou cílovou skupinou oběti domácího násilí. Abych to přeložila do jazyka Istanbulské úmluvy, bavíme se o azylových domech pro oběti domácího násilí, které tedy tam jsou označeny jako shelters. A z těch 93 poskytovatelů zodpovědělo dotazník 61, takže návratnost byla 66%, ale důležitější jsou ty závěry. Pouze 5 z těchto 93 registrovaných služeb poskytovalo tu pobytovou službu, tedy azylové ubytování, výhradně cílové skupině oběti domácího násilí, což tvoří necelých 5% z celkového počtu. A těchto 5 registrovaných služeb je provozováno 3 organizacemi, a to pouze v těch největších městech. A tím se dostáváme k potřebě specializovaných služeb, které by byly šité na míru obětem a speciálním potřebám žen, obětí násilí a jejich dětem, ale k tomu asi, pokud vás to bude zajímat víc, tak ráda zodpovím něco dál v diskuzi, protože si myslím, že tady jsou ještě zajímavější hosté. Děkuji.
Thank you very much. Let's get right to the neighbor, Slovakia. Can you give us a little bit of an overview, similarly, where we are in terms of the Istanbul Convention, but also from your perspective as a practitioner in a slightly different field again from your colleague? How is this working for you? What are some of the challenges? Thank you.
Počujete ma? Áno, dobre. Ja teda tiež využijem tú príležitosť, že sa nachádzam v Čechách a dúfam, že moja slovenčina vám bude ešte zrozumiteľná. Je to teda pomerne komfortná pozícia na medzinárodnej konferencii môcť rozprávať rodným jazykom. Ja som si pripravila veľmi stručnú prezentáciu. Poprosím o ovládačku. Skúsime. Ak to nebude fungovať, tak si poradíme aj bez prezentácie. V prvom rade, teda ja prichádzam z koordinačno-metodického centra, ktoré bolo vytvorené na Slovensku v roku 2015 ako predefinovaný projekt podporený z norského finančného mechanizmu. Koordinačno-metodické centrum teda má byť tým koordinačným orgánom podľa Istanbulského dohovoru, ktorý vytvára a implementuje tie celonárodné politiky, keď ja teda skôr mám radšej názov postupy a nie politiky, ktoré teda majú zaručiť účelnú ochranu a podporu žien zažívajúcich násilie a obetí domáceho násilia a tiež efektívnu a aktívnu prevenciu. Veľa sme tu počuli už včera a zaznelo to aj dnes pri tých spoločných prezentáciách pre panel pre rovné príležitosti, aké dôležité je vzdelávanie v rámci vlastne prevencie všetkých foriem diskriminácie alebo teda prejavov nerovností medzi mužmi a ženami, z čoho teda násilie na ženách je tou najvýraznejšou a najbrutálnejšou formou zásahu do ľudských práv. V tomto ohľade teda sa chcem reflektovať svojich predrečníkov a predrečničky a tiež sa teda prihováram za veľkú reflexiu a nové nastavenie prístupu k vzdelávaniu, a to teda od tých najmenších detí až po vysoké školy. My potrebujeme prenastaviť spôsob, akým pristupujeme k deťom, jednak kvôli tomu, že tie deti sú iné, pretože svet sa zmenil. inou formou a v iných množstvách sa dostávajú k informáciám a obsahom, ktoré ich formujú bez toho, že by sme ako rodičia mali na to nejaký dosah. A v tomto ohľade práve školy môžu zohrať významnú úlohu. A teraz sa dostanem naspäť k tej situácii, v ktorej sa my nachádzame na Slovensku. Slovensko podpísalo Istanbulský dohovor ešte v roku 2011 ako jedna z prvých krajín. Doteraz sme dohovor neratifikovali. Ratifikácia bola uzneseniami vlády naplánovaná dvakrát. V tomto roku sme vláda prijala 3. uznesenie, v ktorom teda odložila ratifikáciu Istanbulského dohovoru na viac menej neurčito, pretože ten ako keby termín, ktorý je vytýčený, je pomenovaný opisne, že k ratifikácii teda pristúpime v tom prípade, ak sa uzavrie spoločenská debata o tom, k čomu ten Istanbulský dohovor vlastne smeruje. A nebudem teda hovoriť o tom kontexte a veľmi zložitých a šťastie aj veľmi únavných debatách, pretože o tom sme tiež počuli veľa od predrečníkov včera, ale teda máme na Slovensku všetko to, čo sa objavuje v iných krajinách, od rodovej ideológie začnúc až po pomerne silne homofóbne a transfóbne postoje, ak sa bavíme o Istanbulskom dohovore. Tak či onak, ako koordinačno-metodické centrum a tiež teda, ak môžem hovoriť za kolegyne a kolegov, ktoré v iných sektoroch sa venujú tejto téme, vrátane mimovládnych organizácií, aj na tej úrovni vládnej sú veľmi silní podporovatelia a podporovateľky boja proti násilia na ženách a rodovej rovnosti. Takže my vlastne momentálne realizujeme 3. národný akčný plán prevencie eliminácie násilia na ženách, ktorý je teda založený na rodovej perspektíve a zohľadňuje rodové nerovnosti ako príčinu a tiež dôsledok násilia na ženách. A v tomto pláne, ktorý teda bol pripravovaný počas roku 2013 a má byť realizovaný do roku 2019, Koordinačno-metodické centrum už malo vytýčené svoje úlohy a celý národný akčný plán reflektuje aj požiadavky Istanbulského dohovoru vo všetkých tých 4 základných oblastiach. Takže bez ohľadu vlastne na to, či Slovensko pristúpilo alebo nepristúpilo k ratifikácii, jednotlivé sektory majú vytýčené úlohy, ktoré vlastne majú smerovať k náplňaniu záväzkov Istanbulského dohovoru. Ja sa budem snažiť byť teraz veľmi rýchla. Aká je úloha koordinačno-metodického centra v tomto celom? V prvom rade našou úlohou, Istanbulský dohovor popisuje úlohu koordinačného orgánu pomerne vzletne a zároveň veľmi všeobecne a pri tej ako keby každodennej agende si každý musíme vlastne identifikovať, aké sú naše možnosti, aké sú naše kompetencie. A my sme si, keď sme začali projekt, povedali v prvom rade to, že my nevstupujeme do prostredia, kde nie sú služby, sú služby a sú špecializované služby. To, že či sú dostupné všetkým ženám, je otázne, ale teda máme špecialistov, máme špecialistky, ktoré sa venujú násiliu na ženách. Takisto máme legislatívu, kde násilie na ženách, domáce násilie je postihované ako trestný čin, to isté sa týka sexuálneho násilia, to isté sa týka znásilnenia. To znamená, že aj v prostredí polície, prokuratúry, súdov sú ľudia, ktorí sa venujú tejto téme. A preto teda názov mojej prezentácie bolo, že našou ako keby úlohou a východiskom pri našej práci nie je nanovo pomenovávať agendu, ale zlaďovať potreby, ktoré majú osoby, ktoré zažívajú násilie a poskytovatelia služieb, ktorí ich podporujú a ochraňujú, s tým, aké sú zdroje momentálne v Slovenskej republike. A to zdrojmi teda nemyslím iba financie, i keď teda tie sú veľmi dôležité, ale aj personálne kapacity, odborné kapacity. A medzi zdroje osobne teda počítam aj medzinárodné dokumenty, ako je CEDAW, ako je Istanbulský dohovor, tiež odporúčania medzinárodných orgánov a organizácií. To všetko sú zdroje, ktoré vlastne my využívame pri svojej práci. A nechcem teda viac uberať času ďalším speakerkám. A poslednou vlastne mojou poznámkou a posledným slajdom tej prezentácie, ktorú som vám neodprezentovala, bol slajd o potrebe rešpektu. A podľa mňa Istanbulský dohovor okrem spravodlivosti je aj o rešpekte k ľudským právam a z pozície organizácie alebo vedúcej organizácie, ktorá sa snaží spolupracovať a zlaďovať prácu rôznych inštitúcií a organizovať multisektorálnu spoluprácu, by som rada povedala to, že ten rešpekt musíme mať aj medzi sebou navzájom, cez jednotlivé rezorty. A napriek tomu, že môže mať kritický postoj k práci polície alebo práci zdravotníkov, to, akým spôsobom tieto problémy pomenovávam, musím to robiť z tej pozície rešpektu voči ich kompetenciám a voči ich znalostiam. Pretože každý vieme niečo a iba spoločne môžeme dosiahnuť naozaj efektívnu podporu a ochranu obetí pred násilím.
Thank you very much. Okay, now finally, we've heard two different perspectives. It's interesting how different issues come up in different countries. It's really quite different across Europe. But I wanted to ask you, Lina, can you tell us about the Norway situation right now and from your perspective? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I can see from my watch we have 17 minutes to go, and this is going to include discussion. So I'll try to be as quick as I can, even though I can speak for an hour if you like. But okay. Maybe, yes, maybe you can just, yes, thank you very much. Okay, just let me start by giving you some key facts about Norway and the convention. And Norway signed the convention the 7th of July 2011. And it took us exactly 6 years to ratify. But this is not due to our, that we are so lazy or that there have been big problems, but it's due to our constitution. Because our constitution tells us to have everything in place before we ratify. So I know from many other countries they can ratify and then later on make changes in legislation. We cannot do that in that way. And the convention entered into force 1 week ago, 1st of November 2017. So yes, it's actually we were going to celebrate the 1st of November, but we are going to celebrate in March instead by having a conference to celebrate that we ratified and to make the convention known in a Norwegian context. But to be able to tell you about our experiences with implementation after 1 week, even though the Norwegians are known to be very effective, it should be maybe a bit early to tell you about our experiences. But I think maybe I use 2 sentences to give you just an idea about the Norwegian context, the context where the convention is going to be implemented. And violence against women and domestic violence has been high on the Norwegian government's agenda since 1999. And I'm using 1999 as a starting point because that was the year that the first plan of action against violence against women were presented in Norway by the government. When that is said, before 1999, the role of the women's movement in this field was dominant in Norway. The government was there, but it was the women's movement who did the work to make the first plan of action actually become a plan. In 2014, the government launched its 5th plan of action. And a lot has been done in this nearly 18-year period. We also then have plans, different plans. We have plans on domestic violence, we have plans on FGM and forced marriages. So we're actually using action plans as tools to bring the work forward. When it comes to the obligations in the Istanbul Convention, I believe that Norway, to a great extent, already meets the requirement of the convention. We have statistics, we have the legislation in place, we are working constantly on gender equality. We do research, we are improving on protection by the police, and we try to develop new policies. But we can definitely be better. And we also face huge challenges in the Norwegian context. We have very few convictions when it comes to rape and when it comes to domestic violence. We know that this is a big problem. 20 to 30% of homicides in Norway are intimate partner homicides. We know from Norwegian research that these homicides absolutely is possible to prevent in a better way. And we have to prevent this. We have to work, we have to save lives. We are also striving to provide coordinated response. We have a lot of specialized services, but they are not coordinated. I could continue this list, but my point is that the Istanbul Convention provides us with a new standard. And it points out the direction for our work to come. And we are now actually planning to make a plan of action because the plan of action runs out 2017. So we are discussing now with our politicians. We don't know yet if we are allowed to do it, but we hope we are allowed to do it. And of course, then the Istanbul Convention is going to be the starting point for the new plan of action. I guess maybe should I stop here? If I can continue to give you some examples from Norway, but maybe it's better to take the discussion, or?
Absolutely, we can come back to those examples. I'm sure in the discussion we'll make sure that we cover it.
Yeah.
But thank you very much. Yeah. No, thank you. That was great. Thank you. Well, I have a couple of questions for the panelists, but I'm going to open up the floor first. So please, go ahead. Please state your name, introduce yourself, and then ask your question. I think there are mics. You can take. Well, we'll need this for the. Well, we can share. Go ahead. Thank you.
Dobrý den, budu mluvit česky. Mé jméno je Hana Štelcová, jsem ředitelka České ženské lobby a chtěla jsem se zeptat Branislavy Marvanové na ty azylové domy. Já si myslím, že je důležité uvědomit si, jaký je tedy rozdíl jaký je rozdíl mezi azylovými domy, kde je poskytovaná pomoc pouze ženám, obětěm násilí. A protože i v těch ostatních azylových domech jsou většinou ženy s dětmi v nějaké složité životní situaci. A myslím si, že pro komplexní pochopení vlastně té situace je potřeba pochopit ten rozdíl. A pak jsem se chtěla zeptat paní Beaurevelové, jaký vlastně vliv má vaše centrum, nebo spíš mám takový pocit, že tak, jak jste popisovala vaši práci, tak nemáte vliv na vznik nových služeb sociálních, jde spíš o nějaké vzdělávací, monitorovací nebo možná i lobbingové aktivity. A mně přijde Istanbulská úmluva nejdůležitější právě v tom, že by měla zajistit tu síť té pomoci obětem násilí. Takže kdo vlastně se zhostí tohohle úkolu, kdo bude motivovat ty poskytovatele sociálních služeb, aby vznikaly služby pro oběti? Děkuji.
Já s dovolením začnu. Děkuji za ten dotaz. Istanbulská úmluva hovoří specificky o specializovaných službách, hovoří také o obecných službách. I EIG vlastně definuje rozdíl mezi obecnými službami a specializovanými službami a centry pro ženy, které mají zkušenost s násilím. Ten rozdíl je klíčový v tom, že obecné služby, jako například obecné azylové domy, poradny, občanské poradny, lékař, policie, to jsou služby a instituce, které jsou dostupné všem, nicméně nemusí reflektovat ty specifické potřeby právě obětí násilí, které zejména ve fázi, kdy vyhledá oběť pomoc nebo kdy odchází do azylového domu, zejména ve chvílích, kdy je nejvíce ohrožená na životě, respektive ten rozchod také znamená výrazný rizikový faktor. Takže právě v těchto momentech je potřeba poskytnout té oběti specifické služby, které budou zohledňovat aktuální rizika, které budou zajišťovat její bezpečí, což například v azylovém domě, který není specializovaný, nemá například možnost nějakých bezpečnostních opatření, jsou tam volně návštěvy, může tam kdykoliv kdokoliv přijít. De facto tam může být přijat k pobytu i ten, kdo se násilí dopouští, nebo tak to nezajistí bezpečí té oběti. To znamená, že to neřeší tu její situaci. Proto je klíčové mít dostupnou síť specializovaných center, protože obecné služby jsou dostupné všem, ale specifické služby by měly být zaměřité opravdu na míru potřebám žen a jejich dětí, které mají zkušenost s násilím. A to, myslím, už bylo na mě všechno, že? Nevím už, jestli tam byl nějaký další dotaz. Jo, děkuji.
Okay. Yeah. Ďakujem za túto otázku aj teda za uvedenie, čo sú to špecializované služby a ja teda absolútne súhlasím s tým, že ženy zažívajúce násilie a ich deti, pretože teda tie deti sprevádzajú touto situáciou a my sa pozeráme na deti ako na priame obete násilia, ktoré zažíva matka v prípade, ak teda ide o partnerské násilie. A špecializované služby musia teda zohľadňovať jednak otázku bezpečia a jednak aj tiež veľmi osobitných potrieb, ktoré teda tak ženy, ako aj ich deti musia teda dostať tieto potreby uspokojené v špecializovaných zariadeniach. My ako koordinačné metodické centrum nemáme priamy vplyv na to, aké služby alebo aké množstvo tých služieb je dostupné, pretože my nie sme grantová organizácia alebo dotačná organizácia. To, ako sa snažíme o špecializáciu služieb, je momentálne v spolupráci najmä s norským finančným mechanizmom, kde sme vlastne momentálne robíme tretí monitoring kvality a dostupnosti poskytovania služieb, špecializovaných služieb ženám zažívajúcich násilie, kde teda zohľadňujeme štandardy Rady Európy, ktoré sú odporúčané ako kritéria pre špecializované služby. Môžeme sa potom veľa baviť o tom, akou metodológiou to robíme a či tú metodológiu netreba zlepšovať a všetko teda okolo tohoto. Každopádne na Slovensku tá situácia sa za posledné 4 roky výrazne zmenila v otázke jednak dostupnosti špecializovaných služieb vďaka teda norskému finančnému mechanizmu, kde vznikli kvalitné poradenské špecializované centra a tiež nové bezpečné ženské domy. V tomto, tom ďalšom programovom období vstupuje zase, akoby chceme vstúpiť aj my do hry, pretože áno, poskytovateľov nešpecifických služieb je mnoho a určite veľa z nich má potenciál sa špecializovať a to je teda zase naša úloha, ako ich motivovať a ako ich v tomto ohľade viesť. Jednak je to, spolupracujeme teraz s MVOčkami na formulácii štandardov pre špecializované služby. Snažíme sa s kolegyňami z mimovládneho sektora organizovať workshopy, stretnutia, ktoré sú takou formou peer-to-peer vzdelávania medzi tými, ktorí len začínajú, ktorí sú už skúsenejší. A posledná poznámka. To, čo nás určite čaká, je práca v regiónoch s regionálnymi, u nás sú to tzv. Župy, s vedením žup, pretože to sú tí, ktorí financujú sociálne služby a rozhodujú o tom, ktoré zariadenie, ktorá poradenská služba dostane peniaze a to je naša ďalšia cieľová skupina, ktorú musíme presvedčiť o tom, že oplatí sa im investovať do špecializovaných služieb a nie do tých všeobecných.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Please go ahead, introduce yourself if you can.
Thank you. My name is Belinda de Leon. I come from self-help immigrants and refugees in Oslo, Norway. And as an NGO working directly with victims of domestic violence, I couldn't do my work without knowing that I can provide a safe place for the victim that I'm working with. So I understand that your your frustration, and I was wondering if you could tell a little bit, if you know, how the Czech Republic, the state authorities, if they have taken or are planning of taking any steps to provide safety and protection for the victims of domestic violence. Thank you.
Asi nemůžu hovořit za vládu nebo za plány, ale každopádně to, co myslím, že je důležité zmínit, je také národní akční plán prevence domácího a genderově podmíněného násilí, který samozřejmě nějakým způsobem reflektuje tu situaci a má, jeho součástí jsou doporučení pro jednak zvýšení počtu a dostupnosti, ale také nějaké udržitelného financování. Takže já jsem například velmi ráda, že mohla vzniknout ta studie, která trošičku rozlišila vlastně nebo ukázala, že ne všechna lůžka, která jsou dostupná v azylových domech v České republice pro ženy, jsou zároveň pro ně bezpečná. A to si myslím, že je nějakým jako odrazovým můstkem pro to, abychom se mohli dívat dál na to, jak ty služby specializovat. A já tady mám v sále kolegyni, která před 20 lety zakládala náš azylový dům a myslím, že ona by mohla víc mluvit o tom, jaký to byl postup a jakoby, jaké výzvy, jakým výzvám jsme čelili za těch 20 let. Ale myslím, že i po těch 20 letech máme pořád energii k tomu věřit, že ty věci se posouvají, protože se posouvají. Někdy pomalu, ale posouvají.
Thank you. I'm looking at the organism, thinking if there's one more question, one burning question, we can do it. But I haven't seen other hands up, so we might be able to wrap it up. It is already 10:30. It's gone very quickly. Any final burning questions? Speak now. Okay. Yes, please go ahead. You have the final word before we break.
Just about Istanbul Convention. This convention is really consists of a lot of obligations for the state in various areas, like family law, criminal procedure law, and many others. That's really comprehensive act and ask a lot of obligations for the every single country who ratify or sign the convention. And for me, the crucial article of that convention is Article 8, relating to the obligation to every single country to provide enough adequate financial and human resources to implementation of the Istanbul Convention. Without that, we can speak just about the convention. So, just a final hint about the Istanbul Convention, it presumes minimum of the standards. If countries has opportunity to go further and better is more than welcome. Thank you. That's my
final word. Fantastic.
Of the Istanbul Convention. And of course, I would like to encourage countries to ratify convention, because it's always incentive. Always after ratification, we can see a lot of activities, not just in the legislative framework, also in other areas. Thank you so much.
So please help me thank these excellent panelists. Thank you for joining us. And since we had so little time, I do really encourage all of you to grab, especially Lina, who had just very little time to speak, and everyone else, of course, but there's so much here to unpack. So use the coffee break wisely. Thank you very much again for joining.
I tried to
Abe lagt igjen disse. Og det er krise.
Yes. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. And welcome to this last panel of this very well-organized conference. We will have 1 hour and 15 minutes to talk about interventions with adults who use violence in close relationships. So what we will do is try to give you an idea of how we work with violent people in different countries in Europe. And our aim is in a way to show how difficult it also can be to move from an idea and a convention like the Istanbul Convention to the practical implication and implementation in the field. Because most of us in this panel are therapists, and we do the work that is necessary, and we're also very happy to have at least one real activist in the panel who is the link to the Istanbul Convention. So I hope you will find this interesting. And the way we are going to do this today is that we first have a short round where the participants can say something about how they actually work, so that you get an idea how the work looks like. And then we have a second part where we talk about how we would like it to look like if we would have better funding and stable funding, and how should the collaboration between NGOs and services and the state be. So we have a lot to cover, but we just try our best. I'll start by introducing myself and the panel. My name is Henning Mohaupt. I'm a clinical psychologist from Alternative to Violence in Norway. Next to me is my colleague Barbara Jakobsen. She is also a clinical psychologist, but she works in a different part of the country. Next to her we have Heinrich Geldschläger, a psychologist working with the Connexus Association in Barcelona in Spain. Rosa Logar from the Intervention Center in Vienna, and also a member of Grevio. So she is presenting together with Heinrich Kraus, who is a clinical psychologist working at the Men's Center in Vienna. And last but definitely not least, we have Radan Shafarshik from the head of the Secretariat of the Government Council for Equality of Women and Men. And I would like to state initially that all of us in this panel base our work on what is put down in the Istanbul Convention and what you can see on the slide. Article 16 of the Istanbul Convention is specifically about that there should be services for to fight gender-based violence, in the sense that people who have that problem get an opportunity to change. We all clearly acknowledge that violence, domestic violence, is gender-based. It is about men's violence against women. And it is the perpetrator's responsibility to stop the violence. We also believe, as the Istanbul Convention demands, that services should have at their heart the safety of the victims and the support of the victims. Further, we all work after models that use multi-level approaches. That means that we see the necessity to be part of a collaboration and a coordinated effort in the cities we work at, so that we are not the only service active in any case. There should always be a collaboration with other services. Yeah, but still, while we agree on this, there are differences how to do this, you know, and different models, and we are going to cover these during this panel. However, I would like to start with Mr. Shafarshik. If you could say some words about the present-day situation in the Czech Republic regarding services for people who are violent in the family. Yeah, if you could help us with that.
Okay, thank you for the floor, and thank you very much for the invitation to this very interesting panel. My role today here is quite different to the other members of this panel, as I'm not myself a therapist. I'm a lawyer, and I'm responsible for, let's say, setting up the framework for programs for violent persons, as I work at the Gender Equality Unit of the Office of the Czech government. We are responsible in general for gender equality policy at the governmental level, including the policy in the field of gender-based violence and in the field of programs for violent persons. Let me start with a brief overview of the situation in the Czech Republic regarding the general framework. I will just try to figure out how to get to the next slide. Okay, it's that way. Okay. Okay, prevention of gender-based violence and domestic violence is one of the priorities of the Czech government. It is enshrined in the governmental statement, policy statement. The Czech Republic signed the Istanbul Convention in May 2016. And now we are in the process of the preparation of the ratification of the Istanbul Convention. We have to make some legislative changes before we can ratify the Istanbul Convention, but we all hope that we will soon be able to make the ratification. In 2015, the Czech government adopted the action plan for the prevention of domestic and gender-based violence for 2015 to 2018. It was our second action plan in this field. The first one was covering the period of 2011 to 2014. In the first action plan, as well as in the second action plan, the work with violent persons was one of the priorities. In this current action plan, there is a number of different measures for various ministries in the field of support for therapies for violent persons. One of the measures is to ensure the availability of interventions for violent persons, or to adopt and implement standards of quality of those interventions. We have a specific working group on programs for violent persons, which is a body of our committee for the prevention of domestic violence. The working group is meeting regularly every 3 months, and at the moment it is working mainly on the issue of financing and on the issue of standards of quality of the interventions. In 2016, the Office of the Government funded an analysis of work with violent persons. It was the very first study focusing specifically on interventions for violent persons in the Czech Republic, and we, thanks to these analyses, were able to get very useful information. However, the analysis was just a pilot study, so the information we got are not so deep or so much covering. Okay, next slide. Thank you. Based on the study or on the analysis, we can say that in the Czech Republic at the moment we have around 10 organizations. At the moment, I guess it's 9, which are providing interventions to violent persons. They are located mainly in Prague and in Brno. That means that the availability of those programs is very limited in many of the Czech regions. The first program was opened in 2007. It was an individual program working only with individuals. In 2008, the first group program was opened. That means that the Czech experience with such interventions is quite limited. Each of the organization which is providing those interventions has a different approach. Some of them are using therapeutic interventions, some of them are working with anger management, some of them are using individual therapy, some of them are using closed groups, some of them open groups. Each of them is very, very different. Each of them also have their own individual standards. It means that at the moment there is no unified standards of quality. And only some of the organizations focus on masculinity and violence or gender equality issues. Not all of them are working with the gender equality perspective. The organizations usually or mostly work with self-referred clients. It means it's not on a voluntary basis. In the Czech Republic, perpetrators can be mandated to attend programs for violent persons within the criminal procedure or within the minor offense procedure. However, the organizations are mostly focusing on voluntary clients. One of the organization or one of the programs is focusing on violent persons who has been sentenced to prison. So it means that we have only one organization which is able to come to prison and work with violence, with violent persons who are already in prison. As regard their financing, there is no systematic support. Each of them has found different ways how to finance their work. Some of them were supported by the Norway grants. Many of them use social services. Some of them are financed by local and regional authorities. And there is the grant program of the Ministry of the Interior, which is focusing on prevention of crimes, which is also used by those organizations to cover funding Some of them are using health services financing within the Ministry of Health, and some of them are using the probation service of the Ministry of Justice to get financing. Some of them use co-financing by participants. Actually, most of them used co-financing. And there are also some other ways how they can find financing. But the main point is that at the moment there is no systematic support or systematic financing of those organizations. And the last issue I would like to mention is what we are currently working on. As I said, there are no unified standards, so this is one of our priority. At the moment we have created those standards and we are working on their adoption and on their implementations in order to secure that all organizations who get financing from the public sources used those unified standards of quality. Another issue is the systematic financing. We have been in touch with the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs, and we are trying to come up with a new grant program which would be focusing on violent persons, or at least get the possibility to finance those programs into the current programs of the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs. And the last issue we are focusing is awareness raising in order to spread the message among violent persons that they can try to solve their situation if they wish. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was very informative for us, and we will get back to some of the points that you mentioned here. As I said, the implementation of a legal document can be done in different ways, and it is a huge work to in a way get people to unified standards is probably the word I'm looking at here. How should we work with people? Are there standards that should be common for everyone? Is it important to look at cultural differences, across countries? And these things become obvious when we look a bit about at how we work in different contexts in Europe with gender-based violence. And I would like to start the presentation of the services so that you and the audience get an idea of what we do every day. We're trying to do this work. So I would like to give the word to Heinrich Geldschläger from Barcelona, who will present his program.
Have to press. Okay. Now? Better, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Henning, for the introduction and for all your work in preparing this panel. Thank you also to the organizers for inviting me to take part in this panel. And good morning to everybody. Thank you for being here. It's a great pleasure and actually an honor to share this panel with two of the most advanced programs for perpetrators probably in Europe, and I'm happy to have this opportunity. Before I will tell you a bit about how we try to organize our work at Connexus, a small NGO in Barcelona and Spain, I would like to give you a brief overview about the context for the work with perpetrators in Spain. So I don't know if maybe you will be quicker in. Yeah. Currently, in Spain, there are three different types of programs for perpetrators, two of which are within the criminal justice system. The first one is the programs that are delivered in the prisons and in their open section. As you might know, we have probably still one of the most advanced laws on gender-based violence since the year 2004. This law obligates the state and the prison services to offer specific programs for those men who have been convicted of gender-based violence and who are in prison. So these programs run regularly in around 40 of the 60 prisons that we currently have in Spain. The second type of program, also within the criminal justice systems, are those that we could call probation services. also for men who have been convicted for gender-based violence, but because it is their first conviction and it is for less than 2 years of prison, judges can suspend this conviction and sentence the men to different alternative penal measures, which can include the participation in a program. And thirdly, we have the community-based programs for self-referred or voluntarily attending men, and our program at Connexus is one of those. Most of the programs in Spain are of the first two types, and this is my plea for the importance of also offering work for perpetrators, for those who have not been convicted, who are not within the criminal justice system. Because, as you can see in this graphic, in this pyramid, only 2.5% of all the perpetrators end up participating in a program in Spain through the criminal justice system. And that has to do with that, as in most other countries, only around 20% of violent incidents are reported to the police, and only part of those end up being sentenced. We have around 50,000 sentences for gender-based violence in Spain every year. 30,000 of those are convictions, and only in half of these convictions the man is sentenced to participate in a program. So only 2.5% of all men who use violence in Spain, these 600,000 are based on the last representative survey that we had in Spain a few years ago, are being helped or are receiving a treatment through the criminal justice system. So we think it is really important that besides the criminal justice system, voluntary access to perpetrator services is offered. You can go to the next slide. It is important to see that our work with perpetrators at Connexus is integrated into a more integrated offer with different programs against gender-based violence, offering services also for women survivors, children who have suffered gender-based violence and their mothers, but also more recently programs for LGBTI people who have suffered or used intimate partner violence. And also we have a program for the universities against gender-based violence, which we started because of the experiences that young people don't usually attend our services, both for survivors and for perpetrators. And if the young people don't come to the services should go to the young people, and they are, at least some of them, at the university. So we started this project a few years ago. If we look at the program for men, in line with the Istanbul Convention, the safety of the victims and survivors, the women and children, is of course our main objective. The reduction in violence of all types. Actually 25% of the men that come to our services have not yet used physical or sexual violence. Working for respectful, caring relationships is of course one of the objectives. And again, in line with the Istanbul Convention, we work from a gender perspective, taking into account structural inequalities, the power relations between men and women, and masculinities and how they are related to the use of violence by the men we work with. But also the emotional regulation, the difficulties in emotional regulation and how they are related to the use of violence, and sometimes because of early trauma in the man's life story. And an important part of our work is the relationship that men have with the use of violence, their history of and learning of the violence throughout their life. And the work is organized mainly in 3 phases. There's an intake and assessment phase first, and then an intervention phase, which preferably consists of group work, but exceptionally can also consist of individual work. And then there is an evaluation and follow-up work, ideally up to 2 years after the end of the treatment. Again, highly important, as Henning said before, our work is integrated into a coordinated community response, so we proactively contact the partners of the men and ex-partners of the men we work with to be sure that our work really contributes to their safety and doesn't jeopardize it unwillingly. We closely are coordinated with the women's and children's support services, especially, of course, if they're in our own organization, but also, of course, with other organizations' services. Also, the coordination with services that men are referred from or that they are being attended by, mental health, substance abuse, or social services, for example. And we do screening for substance abuse and mental health issues and refer men to the corresponding services if we detect a need for that. We start a short mention on the funding, which is in our case insufficient and unstable, mainly based on grants by different public administrations on the regional, Catalan and provincial level. And we also have contribution from the men we work with if they have the possibilities to pay for that. We never exclude anybody for these reasons. And to finish off, the main themes of intervention that we do work with, we don't have a manualized program, but we do concentrate on these different aspects, which are the responsibility, accountability of the men for their violence, and the empathy with the victim survivors, to be really aware of the consequences of the violence they use. Another important aspect throughout the program is the analysis of the violent episodes and to help them understand what they use the violence for, what the intentions behind the violence are, which they sometimes don't when we start the program. And that very often leads us to working around the issue of masculinity, of gender stereotypes, expectations of the partners and children, and how these are used, are related to the use of violence. As I said before, the relationship with violence, the history of violence, how they have incorporated the use of violence throughout their life history and the history of the current or past relationship. We do specific work on sexual violence because it has such devastating effects on the women, and it is so difficult for the men to talk about. So we do specific work on that, which includes, for example, on how men have been educated around sexuality, and pornography, as we've heard this morning, is one of the issues that we do work on in this context. Another specific effort that we think is very important is that of fatherhood, to help men understand the effects of violence on their children, to help them understand that they can't, as many of them say, be a good father while they use violence against the mother of the children. This is a highly important issue, and it is a good motivator many times for men to embark on the process of change. And finally, of course, it is important to reconstruct, recreate alternative ways of relating, of being with their partners and their children. I think I should stop here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Heinrich. As your last list points out, you can see that there are many issues that show up when you work with men who have violence problems. You know, it's really a lot to choose from when you think how you could and should help them to become better men and better parents. And that also shows how difficult this work is and how we still have to learn all the time to understand how much there is needed in order to help these men to become responsible family members. I would like to give the word to my colleague Barbara, who's going to talk about alternative to violence work in Norway. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that I can be a part of the panel. It's a very important discussion we have today. I'd like to give you some brief information about alternative to violence, and then I'll talk a little bit how we work with our clients and with the family. Alternative to Violence is a treatment and research center in Norway for violence in close relationship. It started 30 years ago in 1987, and the initiative and the support came originally from the women's movement. Today, Alternative to Violence work with both men, women, and children, but 85% of the men who contact Alternative to Violence and who use violence are men. We have approximately 1,000 new clients every year in therapy. Alternative to Violence is an NGO, and it's funded by both government and municipalities. And in Norway, there is a high degree of political will to support or to focus to domestic violence and support both the development and the services for women and children, and the service and the treatments for men who use violence. And the important thing is that the resources that are used for the work with men who use violence are not at the expense on the resources that are used for women and children who are exposed to violence. I think it's very important. The overriding perspective is to try to stop violence, which is possible, we believe. And the adult who uses violence is responsible for violence. And we understand violence as a problem of both individual experiences, social conditions, and as a gendered problem to the society. I'd like to give you the basic frame of our intervention. 60% of our clients we meet are self-referred. They contact Alternative to Violence themselves. And 40% get the recommendation at other places, like child protection services, family counseling office, police, probation service, physicians, and others. We always start with the assessment. It's pretty similar as Heinrich was talking about, where we try to understand the violence in the family. We have like 1.5 hour to 3 hour sessions where we go pretty in-depth mapping of violence. We do screening of symptoms of psychiatric disorders. We do the background assessment. We ask for the motivation. Why are you here? What do you want? What do you want to achieve? We also look, we use trauma experience checklist. We look at the background when it comes to traumatic experiences, because we see that a lot of our clients have experienced adversities and trauma during their childhood. The condition to start in the treatment of alternative to violence is to give us permission to contact the partner. So if the client wants to start the therapy, he has to sign that we can contact the partner, and we invite the partner to us, and we want to talk about the violence. We want to talk about the responsibility for the violence, because many women who come to us, they say, oh, maybe it's also my fault. And we feel that we need to talk about violence and give them some information. We want to give them information if the client drops out. And we want to assess if she needs to go to therapy, or if we need to refer her to another place. And it's the same with children. The last point is family perspective. We always look at the whole family. Do we need to contact child protection services? What does the child need? And the very good thing now, which Henning is going to talk more about, is that now we can work with the whole family. We can also work with children, which we think is so important. I just briefly go through what we do in the therapy when we meet clients. Actually, we use different therapeutic approaches, but there are some topics, some themes, pretty similar as Heinrich talked about, that we think is very important to address always when we work in the therapy and focus on violence. And one of the topics is violence. When we meet our clients, they sometimes, when we ask them, what is violence? They say, yeah, that I hit her. But we need to discuss that there are many types of violence. There is also sexual violence, psychological violence, material violence. And we help them to describe the violence, because many men who come to therapy, they try to explain it, but we want to help them to describe and to take responsibility for violence, because then they also can feel a higher degree of control of their actions when they can take responsibility. We also focus on the client's personal history related to violence, attitudes towards women, and as mentioned before, also trauma history. And the development of empathy, the ability to mentalize, etc. At the end, I just like to say that we also think that research is very important. We want to look at what we do, how we do it, what works in therapy. And there is a study, ongoing study now at the Norwegian Center for Violence and Traumatic Stress Studies that looks at the process in the therapy and the outcome. And we have some results when it comes to what kind of men contact alternative to violence, and we have also some results when it comes to outcome. Is it the last slide? Where we can see a reduction of the violence 18 months after the therapy. And then there's one important thing. We ask both clients and their partner. So here are the numbers where you can see the dark blue is after the assessment and the light blue is 18 months after treatment stop. Thank you.
Yeah, time flies, so I will be very brief. And I work at the same organization as Barbara, so there is not so much more to say about the basic ideas of our work, but there is a very important difference. I work in Stavanger, which is the largest office of Alternative to Violence, and we are in a way a model office for where we want to go with our work. From the beginning, we were the first office that was to meet not only adults who are violent in the family, but also the victims, both women and children mainly. So we had from the start a service for women and children. Yes. And the thing is that this kind of model has taught us a lot, and the idea is that this is the way Alternative to Violence wants to go in the future. So we try to involve all members of the family, because we think that violence affects everyone, and it's not only the perpetrator who needs help, but also the victims and especially the children, and they all need very different help. It's a very different experience being exposed to violence as a mother than being exposed to violence as a child or as a young person. So we have special competencies in our staff. We have child psychologists. We have people who have trauma therapy competence. We have people with special education on alcohol and substance use, family therapists, and people with experience from child protection work. And we work as teams. Our main question when we receive a new referral is, what does a child in this family need to be safe? That's the question we ask, and we organize our work around that question. So our main focus is children, and the reason for that is that there is so much knowledge pouring forth how detrimental violence is for children's development. And the earlier we can make things safe for a child, the more we help the family. Because both for women who are victims of violence and for men who use violence, one of their main concerns are the children. That's what we repeatedly hear. They are afraid that their children have been damaged, and often the children have big trouble. And this is how we. This is why we made these changes to the original model. And also we have this policy that everyone should work with every group. So there are no specialized men therapists and no specialized women therapists or children therapists, but everyone should work with adults who use violence, everyone should meet victims, and everyone should meet children, so that we can learn how this affects everybody. And my personal experience is that working with women who have lived through violence is completely necessary in order to understand how you have to work with men who use violence. It is crucial, because only then you get the full picture. Yes. So just some pictures how it looks like where we work. We do therapy, individual therapy mainly. We have group therapies for men who use violence. We have group therapies for women who have lived through violence. And that's actually the work we do most of. We have 2 groups every fall in this little city of ours. And we have child therapy and mother-infant or mother-child therapy for very young children who are under the age of 5, so that they together can, in a way, understand better how each other have been affected by the violence. Yes, so that was us. I think I stop there. And you can, of course, ask questions later on, but I really would like to move on to Rosa and Heinrich Kraus, because time flies. And you know, Alternative to Violence and Connexus, they base their work on voluntary attendance, and the really interesting thing about what Rosa and Heinrich do is that they have a partnership, and they have had a partnership for a very long time. You decided not to present on slides, so I'm just going to interview you if you're ready. Yes. So could you please describe shortly your partnership? How does it work?
Yeah, thank you. Well, we wanted to have a discussion rather than presentations. Sorry, but we brought you our presentation as handout. So we did make a PowerPoint, but we are not using it. Thank you for the opportunity to take part in this panel. Yes, we represent here the anti-violence program in Vienna, which is running since '99, and it's a partnership program. That's why we always also has the principle that we present it together. It should be made visible that these are 2 organizations, the Men Center working directly in the training with the men, and the Intervention Center working with the victims, women and children mostly. So to make that visible, we always have this principle to present it also together, because we think that's important. It's important. Representation is an important part of gender equality. So just to also give a little bit of the context of our program in Austria, which has been done before also. The Intervention Center in Vienna is one of the 9 centers that we have in 9 provinces in Austria. It serves victims of violence against women, domestic violence and stalking. In Vienna we serve about 6,000 survivors or victims a year, so it's a huge number. Most of them we get referred by the police because, as you know the colleagues from the Czech Republic know the Austrian colleagues well. We have these police expulsion orders since 20 20 years. So the perpetrators get expelled from the house for 2 weeks. This is also a part of work with perpetrators, I would say. I think the definition, what is work with perpetrators, we receive about 4,000 such expulsion orders by the police in a year. And what's very striking is only a small part of the perpetrators get into the anti-violence program. So, I mean, for various reasons, which we will maybe not be able to explore all of them. We also try to set standards in Austria. So we have set up 5 years ago a federal working group, which is also funded by the ministry, by 2 ministries, on what we call victim safety-oriented work with perpetrators, because we want to develop common standards. And these organizations who are involved are men's centers, women's support services, and the probation service. We find the probation service a very important partner for the work with perpetrators. We want to see the work with perpetrators in a holistic way, not only as isolated programs working with a few men. We want to see it in the whole context, also to see which measure fits which person. So not everyone needs therapy, for instance. So this is a little bit the context, and we are also members of the European Network Work with Perpetrators, which you are also, and I think some of you here are also. I think it's good to see that we have this wider context in which we are working. The partnership principle, it's a different, this is the more different, I would say, in our programs than the fact of volunteer or non-volunteer is that we work, the support of the victim is done by the victim support service, not within the perpetrator program. And we also think that fits more the requirement of the Istanbul Convention, because the Istanbul Convention says the programs should be run in close cooperation with specialized support services. It doesn't say it should be within the perpetrator program. Our professional view is that the perpetrator program cannot at the same time represent the interests of victims, children and women. We think this is a conflict of interest. And we have to be very careful, because also perpetrators drop out of the program, for instance, and we guarantee the continuity of the support for these victims before, during, and after the program. So this is, I think, a very different approach that we also discuss sometimes, and we also have conflicts about this approach. So now Heinrich, I think, will go a little bit more into the practical details of our marriage. It's a marriage. It's a good marriage, and it has problems regularly. I think this is my main learning from this partnership is that it's difficult, because it's about violence, and violence splits organizations, and it's a constant work that we have to do on this partnership to do it well.
So every marriage has its ups and downs, so do we. But we think that it is important to give a good example to our clients, that we are not always the same opinion, of course, but we respect each other, and we come to the same conclusions we both can live with. And that is very important. And I would like to recommend that to the Czech Republic too, that victim support service and perpetrator programs should go to each other and talk to each other and find a joint solution for problems. Now, short to the program, if I'm allowed. We work both with voluntary clients and with mandated clients from the justice system. And we have our work has 3 points. Program with the perpetrator, support program for the victim, and cooperation between our organizations and with the institutions that refer the clients to us. The perpetrator program has 2 parts. There we have a clearing phase with assessment and a clearing group, and then we jointly decide if a perpetrator is allowed for the training or not, or under which circumstances. It's a joint decision. Yeah? And in the moment we have a first session with the perpetrator, we inform the Domestic Abuse Intervention Center that a new man has come to us, and they can independently contact the female partner. Yeah? And we have institutionalized sessions together on a case level and on a management level. Yeah? And then the perpetrator program begins. We mainly work in group, because we didn't invent the wheel, of course. We looked at other programs, and one of the programs we focus on was the Change program and the Domestic Abuse Intervention Center, the Duluth model. So we work mainly in groups, but we also do single sessions. And of course, the contents of the program is the same as the others. There is very much about male socialization, about accountability of the perpetrator, anger management, conflict and communication. But we also integrate other methods as well. For instance, last year we had a training with Marius, and since that time we use the Cineman. It's a movie, a short movie, about the impact of violence to the children, and we use that in our training as well. So we look at what we can integrate in the Austrian circumstances.
Thank you. And I really find this approach very interesting. It has been very interesting reading about your work because, as Rosa says, intervention is not only the intervention when you meet a person, it is a societal intervention, and I think there we have to learn. But it also points or makes it clear that intervening with men who are abusive must happen at many levels, and it's a complex work. It requires a legal basis, and it requires a lot of knowledge about violence and the effects of violence on many levels in society. Politicians need to know, the justice system needs to know, and of course the therapist and the mental health and the health field and the substance abuse field, they all need to know. And it's and that's also an important thing of our work, that we go and train. And I think I see that you all go like this. I think we all do that. That one important part of our work is to share experience and to raise awareness and knowledge. So what we've presented is mainly two different ways of concretely intervening. And time goes, so we will not have the time to discuss it like you, but I would like, before we go on, I would like to see if there are questions from the room to any of us. Yes.
Hello, I'm Eva Šmídová. I'm from the Czech context. I'm a sociologist and teaching gender studies. And thank you very much for all these complex and thoughtful presentations you've just had. From the Czech context, and I'm glad that Radan Šafařík has just presented that there is an attempt to systematic or more structural approach to these issues. But there is this feeling that the organizations, mostly NGOs working with victims of domestic violence or violence against women and children, are now being taken aside by these newly introduced programs or initiatives working on working with men or perpetrators of violence. So I really would like to learn more on what you've mentioned in your presentations, how to make the structure so that they are not competing for the funding, for the funds, which I find very important for the Czech context. And then, in fact, I wonder to learn more how you work with the more structural or systematic approach to gender-based violence, which both of or all of your organizations have mentioned, that it's not just men and women, that it is the cultural expectations or norms that allow allow violence in various contexts. So I wonder if you could perhaps tell more about it.
Thank you. It's a very important question, and it also brings us to the financing part, which we would like to cover a bit. I think I just opened that to all of you. You know, how do we manage? Yes, Rosa, please. How do we manage not to compete for financial support?
Partnership is very important for not competing. So we have an understanding that the work with victims is in itself very important, and victims have the right to support. So that has to be guaranteed by a state first, I would say, because that's a basic requirement. It's in the Victims Directive of the EU, it's in the Istanbul Convention. So this has to be provided, and it should not compete. I mean, that's a governmental, it's a policy issue. It should not compete with the resources that are there for rehabilitation, for the criminal justice system, or for other programs. So you have to keep these things apart. It's a clear policy issue, and the programs should never come into this situation that they have to compete on the practical level for these monies. You need to have different pots for this, and never make them have to fish in the same pot, because that creates conflicts. How can you work together if it's like a couple who has to fight all the time, who will get the money, you know? So this is a very important point. If you want to create partnerships, we have to create clear conditions. And the women's organizations can be sidelined quickly, because it's sort of, you know, I mean, yeah, the women are working with the women, we know this anyway, but the work with perpetrators always gets more attention. It's interesting, no? We can see that. It's much more interesting for the media, for the public. So also for this, the partnership is important, to show it's a joint effort, because otherwise the women's work with the victims gets sort of invisible. And that, again, is not a good model. So 2 answers.
Thank you. And it's, don't fish in the same pot is a very, very good thing to remember. And Barbara, in Norway, how is ATV financed, and how is it made sure that the money is not taken from services for victims?
I think it's a very important question, and as Rosa said, we should not be competing. And the Norwegian experience is that it's not the resources used for the treatment for men who use violence are not at the expense of the resources that are used for the women and children. But we've been talking also about the cooperation, and it's very essential. And I think that there are different approaches and thoughts about how to cooperate, how can we cooperate as 2 organizations. I think it's also an experience to work with the family within one organization. And me as a feminist, I think it's a very important experience to both work with those who use violence and those who are exposed to violence, because I get the knowledge and experience from both sides, and then it's easier for me as well to cooperate. So I think it's also about knowledge and experience, and of course a political question.
Thank you. There was another question in the back there. Is that still on? Yeah.
I'm Branislava Marvanova from Czech Republic. I don't know whether I have a question or comment. Something will came out.
Welcome.
I was just trying to listen, and I got some points here which are probably relevant for our country as well. The question is who, because I heard from colleagues from Austria that the model is like, or the working group is victim safety oriented work with perpetrators. And then also there was a different kind of model approach, and I heard a sentence, more we help the child, more we help the family. And my question is, whom we are helping here, who is in the center, if we are family, if we are focusing on helping families or helping victims or those who are affected by violence. So maybe it's too general, but it's somehow, I think it's important to clarify this in the context of Czech Republic. And maybe it's not that one is better than the other, but I think it's important to discuss this.
Thank you, and it's really important that you make us aware of clarifying this. So when we say that the child is at the center of what we do, it's always safety first, and if the best interest of the child is to make sure that the man who's been abusive does not come close to the family, that's what we go for. You know, so it's not that we always try to get everyone to understand each other. Sometimes it's really only about getting people into safety, and how do we do that? And it's not only sometimes, it's very often. Okay, but that's not enough in our view. It's not enough to establish a non-violent space, because people live with their experiences, and especially small children, they carry their experiences onward. And they will be affected by that. So they need support even after safety is established. Okay, so it's please, Rosa, comment on that.
I have a slightly different view. I think we all care about the children. That's without speaking. But I have a slightly different view, especially in the way we present it, because you were sort of presenting, we were saying the most important are the children. Now that sounds very honorable, but I think it also gives an unintended message, like, well, the mother doesn't count so much anyway. And is that good for our children? No. It's not. And I prefer to have the safety in the airplane approach. Put the mask on you first as an adult, and then you help the children, because if you die, you cannot be there for your child. And we know that also. I mean, the child, the best protection for the children who witnessing violence or who experience violence themselves, in the context of the violence against the mother, is to have the mother, to make sure the mother is safe. So I have a slightly different approach, but I think we are on the same line.
Definitely, and it's really, I really like that you say that. Heinrich, you want to comment on that? No?
I do agree that it's the safety of the people affected by violence, be it women, be it children. And our approach to the work with children is based on what Henning said, that of course the effects on children of experiencing violence are horrific, and we need to give them specialized support. But I also agree with Rosa, of course, that the best support a child can have is a good relationship, a nurturing relationship with the non-violent adult, usually the mothers. So we need to make sure that the mothers are not only safe, but also able to, again, to have this nurturing and caring and safe relationship with the children. So I think there's
and of course, I mean, women have a right on their own to live free from violence. So I mean, they are not only there for the children. So, and I think it's perfectly able to do both. Every woman here who has children does that. You can take care of your own rights and your own needs, and you can take care of your children's rights and your children's needs.
Yeah, that's important. And now we are into the content, and there are conferences on these things that last 2 days. So we will not have. But it brings up the complexity of it and all the possible problems that you can encounter, and it just brings up how desperately we need state and legislation to make this work possible, because it is complicated. There are no easy answers. You know, there are women who will be perfect mothers just they get in safety, and there are women who have problems being mothers after violence because they just can't relax and can't, you know, they need help to do that work. And the thing is, everything is out there because there are so many people affected by violence. It's a huge problem. It's not a few. And of course, as soon as you have a huge group, you have diversity of problems and diversity of needs. Yeah, just to... yeah, are there more questions? That would be... Yes, we have some minutes.
Thank you, Lenka Simerská. I really like the ATV model, and I have a question regarding your recommendation. You said before it is absolutely essential to work with women who live through violence, to be able to understand men who commit violence, and to be able to help them and work with them. So my question is, does it mean that you don't recommend the men-only interventions, such as those who focus only on men to, I don't know, work with their anger or coping with violence, basically? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I just answer that quickly because I think I have an answer for that. Well, if it is in any way possible, and because that also goes to partnership, you know, if it is in any way possible, if you are working in a perpetrator program, go and spend some time at a shelter, go and spend some time at a program for that supports women, and see what actually goes on there and how violence is described and worked with there. Because men, either you have the common problems, they don't really understand the problem, or they are very shameful and minimize the problem. So you get very softened versions of what actually happened. And when you talk to women and they tell you what happened, it engages you in a completely different way. So that's why I think it is so important that we collaborate. Yes, second question.
Markéta Hrdličková, a question for Barbara. Talking about the violent people, it's often connected with addiction, like drug addiction or alcohol addiction. I know that you have experience with the clinic Tirili, if I'm right. Could you tell us in few words your experience with this phenomena, like violence and addiction? Thanks.
Thank you for the question. It's very important, and we could also spend a long time discussing it, because we know that a lot of the violence is perpetrated when the man or the couple has drunk alcohol, or there are some connections when it comes to addiction and violence. But Henning is actually one of those who is a specialist in these connections, so I would like you to
on the substance use. Yes, well, it's really important to say that violence exists independent of substance use and alcohol problems, but still there is a connection. 75% of all women in Norwegian shelters say that the reason or the episode leading up to them having to go to shelter was because of intoxication. So, but it would be also wrong to say that you know, men who use violence, they are really people who have alcohol problems. It's probably that they just lose their barriers, and you know, this mindset and the problem that they may control better while they're sober gets a way out. So, but I think again, the only thing is, it's a complex field. You have people who are violent when they're drunk, you have people who are violent when they're drunk and when they're sober, and you have people who are violent when they're sober. You know, you have people who don't ever drink and still are violent. And it's, our job is to hold up for everyone that this is a complex field. It affects a huge part of the population, and you need specialized services to deal with it, and people who can respond to any of these points that come up, be it addiction or whatever. Yes. Another question back there, please. Yes.
Thank you. I'm Annabela Zigova. I'm an American Slovak filmmaker, producer, and thank you very much for this conference. It's very interesting. I'm going to ask a slightly unorthodox question, which is really in my mind, and probably it's going to be provocative, so I apologize. But we talk about like violence of men on women, and my question is, I'm going to try to formulate it the best way I can. Wouldn't that empower the discourse if we start talking about violence of women too? I'm not trying to cast a shadow on the essential problem, but we have violence of mother on children. We have women who deal with their inner violence, who are violent. And it's not to say that the violence is only a negative thing. It could be a mode of empowerment. So I apologize if this is very provocative. I'm an artist, so...
all questions are good questions. Thank you. Is there anyone who feels, Rosa, you have a response to that?
Well, I mean, there are different forms of violence in our society. In principle, I think every person has a potential of aggression. I come from the city of Sigmund Freud. No, he says culture is all about taming our aggression. But in society, we can see that there are forms of violence where specific groups are affected more than others. And violence against women is one of them. There is also racist violence, there is anti-Semitic violence, there is violence against specific minorities. So this we call specific forms of violence. In our case, gender-specific. Other forms are random. It's because, somebody is there and you hit them. So it is important that we distinguish between, is it a specific form and where does it come from, or is it random? And of course, we don't want to see any violence. And the question of how women deal with violence is per se a very interesting one, because women in the stereotypical education are sort of forced always to oppress their violence. They are not allowed to express violence. A woman who is a little bit violent or loud or aggressive already gets sanctioned. So it's an interesting issue. How do women deal with this inner aggression, with this kind of taboo to be violent? But I think it doesn't do us any good to put this against each other. That doesn't help. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, we're coming to a close. Yes, and we have to sum up. I hope this was informative. I'm very sorry that we did not get so much on the financing. A last comment on that is that with every person, every family where we get to stop violence and we guarantee that kids grow up in a safe environment, we save the state for millions of Norwegian crowns, of Czech crowns, of euros, and one family that we managed to get on the right track finances my work for the next 10 years based on what you save in kind of mental health costs for children growing up, for school problems these children will have, criminality that these children will not be doing, drug abuse that these children will not have, and so on and so on. Leading cause of women's sick leave in Norway is gender-based violence, and it costs a lot of money. So it's a great investment for any country to build and support this work. And it's really good to hear that you have this task force going on, and that you also engage women centers, men centers in this work in order to build a national service. Thank you to all of you. I hope you enjoyed this and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you, and please give the panel a hand here.
To zapnutý, jo. Jenom poprosím, panel vedle končí ještě tak za 2 minuty, tak prosím zůstaňte sedět, my pak už je tady připravený tentokrát technik, tak se rozdělí, sundají ty panely a pak bude shrnutí obou těch částí společné. Takže prosím vydržte, už je tam jdeme utnout. Děkuju.
Okay. Yes, and also handouts from the Vienna project are available. Oh, okay, you have them. Great. Yes, and
we can send